When most people think of Kansas City, two or maybe three things often come to mind: barbecue and jazz, and well, the Kansas City Chiefs. And honestly, they're not wrong. Those things are very real and very earned. But here's what I've learned about cities like this: the first answer is never the whole story. Kansas City has layers, more than you'd expect. And I mean that almost literally. Because underneath the smoke and the saxophone solos, there's a whole other city waiting to be discovered. And today, we're going to find it. Welcome to Pop Culture Passport, your ultimate guide to quirky and cool destinations across the US. I'm your host, Beth Scalacci, aka the Roman Yeti, here to help you dive into the world of theme parks, uncover film and TV locations, and explore quirky museums, roadside attractions, and legendary venues that capture the heart and soul of this unique country. So grab your pop culture passport and let's discover destinations that resonate with your interest, not just with what's trending on social media. Are you ready? Let's roam! Welcome back. Today we are heading to Kansas City, Missouri. Now, I have to be honest with you, this one snuck up on me. I started researching Kansas City thinking I was going to find barbecue and jazz, maybe a fountain or two, and yes, all that is there. But Kansas City kept surprising me at every turn. So today we're going to acknowledge the classics and then we're going to go do some exploring because this city has some stories that deserve to be told. And at the end, we're going to talk about two iconic American snacks that were born right there in Kansas City. And I know I didn't have any idea that it was there, but maybe you know. But so stay tuned for that. Um, I want to start with where everyone starts, and that's the barbecue and the jazz. Because if you're going to talk Kansas City, you have to go there, and you should want to. So Kansas City barbecue has a real origin story. It traces back to a man named Henry Perry, who in the early 1920s was cooking meat in an outdoor pit and serving it wrapped in newspaper. That's it. No frills, no restaurant, just smoke and meat and people who couldn't get enough of it. Now, Penny's style caught on, and a whole generation of pit masters followed. Names like Bryant and Gates that Kansas City locals still argue about today. Over a century later, the city has more than 100 barbecue restaurants. That's not a trend, that's definitely an institution. And then there's jazz. Kansas City's jazz scene grew up in the 1920s and 30s, partly because the city had a very particular relationship with prohibition, which is to say, they largely ignored it. Speakeasies, jazz clubs, all night jam sessions. The 18th and Vine District became one of the most important jazz corridors in the country. It's where Charlie Parker came up, it's where the Kansas City sound was born. Now, if you want to dig into these stories, the American Jazz Museum and the Kansas City Barbecue Museum are both right there waiting for you. But today, we're going to go a little beyond the classics. Our first stop is one that might surprise you or maybe not, depending on how you feel about greeting cards and now actually the movies they make. Hallmark, yes, that Hallmark, the largest greeting card company in the world, has been headquartered in Kansas City since the very beginning of its existence. And that beginning actually has a really interesting story. So in 1910, an 18-year-old named J.C. Hall arrived in Kansas City with two shoe boxes full of picture postcards and a whole lot of ambition. He started selling them out of the local YMCA. Two shoe boxes. That's the origin story of a company that would eventually employ thousands of people and define how Americans express emotion over a century. And now you know why they're called shoebox cards, too. So today, Hallmark still calls Kansas City home, and you can experience that history firsthand at the Hallmark Visitor Center in Crown Center. It's part museum, part behind the scenes look at how greeting cards actually get made, including the design process, the writing, the art. And if you've ever wondered how someone turns thinking of you into a card that makes your grandmother cry, well, you can find out. It's one of those places that sounds like it might be a quick stop and turns out to be genuinely fascinating. Kansas City born, Kansas City made, and it's still there. Now, from greeting cards to the golden age of travel, because that's just how Kansas City rolls. If you've never heard of the TWA Museum, need I need to add it to my list, and maybe you should too. It's located inside the original TWA headquarters building at the downtown Kansas City airport. And walking in feels a bit like stepping into a time machine. TWA, Trans World Airlines, was one of the most glamorous airlines in American history, and Kansas City was its home base. At its peak, flying TWA wasn't just transportation, it was a full experience. Iconic uniforms, the design was sleek, people dressed up to get on a plane. It was a whole different era. And then there's Howard Hughes, because you cannot tell the TWA story without Howard Hughes, who took control of the airline in the late 1930s and turned it into something almost mythological. Eccentric design doesn't even begin to cover it. The museum has vintage uniform, cockpit simulators, retro memorabilia, all inside the building where a lot of that history actually happened. It's the kind of place where aviation nerds and design lovers and anyone who's just a bit nostalgic for that era, you're going to find something to love. It's a small museum with a big story. Okay, so this next one is the one that sort of stopped me in my tracks while I was researching. Because it's the kind of story that sounds made up, but it's not. In 1856, a steamboat called the Arabia was traveling up the Missouri River when it hit a submerged tree trunk and sank. The entire cargo went down with it. A massive shipment of supplies headed for frontier settlements in the West. Dry goods, tools, food, dishes, equipment, everything a frontier town would need, gone, swallowed by the river. Here's the interesting part. The river changed course, which means that the Arabia wasn't just sitting at the bottom of the Missouri River waiting to be found. It became buried under a Missouri cornfield for over 100 years. In 1988, a family, the Hollies, figured out roughly where it had to be based on old maps and historical records. They got permission from the farmer who owned the land. They dug and they found it, 25 feet underground, perfectly preserved by the cold, wet clay, and was almost intact 19th century time capsule. Thousands of artifacts. Bottled pickles still edible after 132 years. I want to know who tested that. Who tried those pickles after 132 years? But boots, dishes, tools, even a top hat. So now today, the Arabia Steamboat Museum in Kansas City's River Market houses that entire collection, and you can see all of it. It's one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds in American history, and it happened under a cornfield. That's the kind of story that Kansas City has been sitting on, literally. Sorry, I couldn't, I couldn't miss the pun. So, from a steamboat buried under a cornfield to a museum that was started with two friends and a shared obsession. The National Museum of Toys and Miniatures sounds like it might be a charming little stop. It is not a charming little stop. It is a world-class institution that happens to be housed in a stunning 1911 mansion on the campus of University of Missouri's Kansas City campus. And it has a great origin story as well. So, two childhood friends, Mary Harris Francis and Barbara Marshall, spent their lives collecting. We've heard this origin story before. This is my favorite thing about museums. Mary collected antique toys. Barbara, who worked in the art department at Hallmark, yes, back to Hallmark, commissioned handcraft miniatures from professional artists all over the world. And at some point, they looked at each other and said, we should probably put this somewhere where other people can see it. And in 1982, they did just that. Today, the museum holds the world's largest collection of fine scale miniatures and one of the largest collection of antique toys in the country. Over 100,000 objects. Here's the thing that people say about this museum. They came for the toys, the nostalgia, the childhood memories, Barbies, G.I. Joes, and vintage board games. And then they wander downstairs into the miniatures and they completely lose track of time because of the craftsmanship. Everything is built to a 1 to 12 scale. 1 inch equals 12 inches in real life. And the detail is almost impossible to believe. Oh, and that mansion I mentioned? It has a kidnapping story attached to it because, of course, a former tenant named Neil Donnelly was abducted from the driveway in 1931 and held for ransom. And they were rescued 2 days later. Now, this is one of those museums where you plan to spend an hour, but you should probably plan on spending a little more time because you could spend the day and not be sure where it happened. And aren't those the best kind of museums? I love that. And now, the one that I've been building toward, because I told you Kansas City has layers, and I mean literally, beneath the city. Yes, I said beneath the city, carved out of ancient limestone mines is something called SubTropolis. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a city underground. SubTropolis is the world's largest underground business complex. We are talking 55 million square feet of space, 10 and a half miles of lighted paved roads, 2 miles of railroad track, all of it underground, all of it carved out of limestone bluffs along the Missouri River where mining began in the 1940s. At some point, the owners looked at all that empty space and thought, what if we just rented it out? And so businesses moved in, more than 50 of them. International companies, government agencies, distribution centers. It stays a constant 70 degrees year round. No weather, no temperature fluctuations. Just perfect time, climate controlled underground city humming beneath the city of Kansas City. Like nothing unusual. Man, it sounds like a it sounds like a scene out of Paradise to me. That Hulu show if you haven't seen it. Very, very close to it. So what are they storing down there? Well, there's original film reels of Gone with the Wind, millions of postal stamps from the US Postal Service. The Nelson Atkins Museum of Art uses it for artifact storage. And also there's some National Archives there. Now, here's your side quest part. You can actually drive through SubTropolis. Monday through Fridays, I think it's 6 in the morning to 6 at night. You can drive in and look around. There's no visitor center. I think there are some tours from different places under there, but you can definitely, drive through just your car and miles of underground road with a bunch of warehouse doors. Um, I just thought it was so interesting. I had never heard of it. I'm sure people in Kansas City know all about it, but this outsider did not. So I did want to add, I hinted at it earlier. I wanted to add a little snack society onto this episode. And here it is. So Kansas City is the birthplace of what I consider two iconic American snacks that I'm pretty sure you've all tried at some point in your life. But the first one is the Bomb Pop. You know, that red, white, and blue popsicle that has been showing up at every 4th of July and backyard barbecue and ice cream truck since 1955. Yeah, born in Kansas City, created by two local men named James Merritt and D.S. Abernathy, who wanted to make a frozen treat that captured the spirit of the space age and patriotism all in one. Mission accomplished, sirs. And the second, and this one surprised me because I, well, I will just share it with you. The candy coating on M&Ms was created in Kansas City. You know, the crispy outer shell. Yeah, the process was developed in Kansas City. Um, so that's science, even though I think they're made in New Jersey now. But yeah, so the candy coating is from Kansas City, and I I just love that they get credit for that, and that's where that happened. Like I said, Kansas City in the research just kept surprising me every single step of the way. And I think it's, one of those places that have it's known for a few things, but there's just so much else going on, like a steamboat under a cornfield, an underground city humming along beneath the street, two women that turned a friendship and a shared obsession into a museum, and a teenager with two shoeboxes full of postcards built a greeting card empire. I mean, Kansas City is full of people who just kept going, who built something out of nothing, and somehow the city holds all those stories at once without making a big fuss about any of them. That's the kind of place I want to keep going back to. And with that, we add another stamp to our pop culture passport. I hope this episode inspires you to get out and roam everything that's quirky and cool, even in your own backyard. Follow, download, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Tell a friend, leave a review if you like what we're doing. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. Just search for The Roaming Yeti. Keep roaming and finding your fun.